everyone. This is Jonathan, and today we're going to be finally comparing Savage Lands and Velheim. Now, Savage Lands is a survival crafting game that was originally released in beta back in 2005 by Signal Studios and later was released into early access. Most of the individuals in beta, if not all, were essentially allowed to keep the game after working on it in beta for free, and I am one of them. However, the game kind of hit a slump, and in May of 2018, Last Bastion Studios took over the project, overhauled a lot of things, added a lot of things, and changed some of the elements, but not all of what the game had to offer. Unfortunately, it seems that this game has lost its prestige with the community. I'm not going to go into it because it's a split bag as far as what's going on with it, and I intend not to take any direct side in this, just because I find the game nostalgic myself and hop in every once in a while to mull around and see all the things that used to be. Now, Valheim is a survival crafting game as well that was released in February of 2021. As of March of 2021, literally a month, almost to the day later, over 5 million copies were sold. In this very wonderfully received rendition of the genre, you are a Viking in Velheim, essentially the 10th world, sort of an in-between going from Midgard, Earth, to Valhalla, the Viking afterlife, for honorable warriors. The game has been received with overwhelming positivity on Steam, and it's still in early access as of March, and at only 500 megabytes is a wonderful game to behold. There's many in the community that think that once they continue to develop and add content, that maybe they will eventually also increase the graphics, which would only add to the grandeur of this game. So that's sort of an introduction to these two games. Now, let's move on into the graphics of these two games. The graphics for Savage Lands have not changed very much in the last 6 years. There have been some minor increases in the human model and some slight tweaks to some of the animals, but nothing extremely big. Valheim has only been around for a month, so there's not a whole lot that has changed, but they are still very nice for a game in early access with as much content as within it. There's more in Valheim than in Savage Lands when they released. The character creation in Savage Lands, although it has brought forth more options, is still very basic, very lackluster for a game that's been in development for its time. There are some new hairstyles, faces, tattoos, skin alterations that came along, if I remember correctly, after Last Bastion took over, which is one of the added bonuses of them taking it over. But it's still not as much as what some of us would have hoped. Valheim, on the other side, has a very in-depth character creation. I think I spent a little more time in Valheim's than I did in Savage Lands in the last videos. There's more hairstyles, more facial expressions. There's actually beards, which you should expect from a Viking game. Skin and hair color differentiation. Just a lot of very good touches to such a new game. Now let's go over some of the base survival mechanics. In Savage Lands, you have to worry about hunger and cold. Hunger is slated by eating food, and it also reflects your energy. The more you exert yourself, the more hunger you expend. And at the same time, cold affects your health. So the colder you get, the more you can take damage from your health. Now, eating will heat you up a little bit, but the main way of dealing off with cold is either to have armor that is well insulated and resists cold, or being inside near a fire. or even near a fire under a lean-to. There are some at the beginning that thought that this mechanic was a little broken and hard, but it was called Savage Lands. It was a very savage game. Now you have to still worry about it, but once you get to a certain level with your armor, the cold doesn't become as much as a factor unless you go dipping your toes in the cold water around the islands. Conversely, Valheim has a very simple health and hunger stamina system in which the level of hunger reflects both your health and your stamina. When you eat, you increase the amount of health you have. You eat enough, it'll get higher. As that food burns off, you eventually will lose that health. At the same time, stamina works the same way. You eat and fill up on food, and your stamina bar increases as well. So if you burn off all the food that you ate and it fades from you, then your health will revert back to your basic and your stamina bar will return to your basic. The only thing closest to the cold mechanic in Savage Lands inside Valheim is when you go into the mountains. And I don't have any footage of this because I haven't found mountains in my world yet. But when you go into the mountains, you get to a certain altitude and you start taking frost damage. At least from my research, the way you counteract this is you will have either clothing that resists cold and freezing, or there's a special brew. Essentially, mead is your potions in Valheim. And so there is a frost resistance mead that will help counteract that. The moving mechanics are about the same. Use WASD for the default. The various keys for inventory and equipment are somewhat different, but they're very intuitive once you start playing. I also want to talk about the stealth mechanic in both games. In Savage Lands, you can stealth and you can't really do anything other than hide behind bushes and sneak up on your intended target. And if your target were to look right at you, there's a chance that they might or might not. You could walk right up to a deer, square in the face, hit it with the sword, and it's done. Valheim is a little more realistic in that if you sneak up on a creature, it has a higher chance of noticing you, especially if the creature looks directly at you and there's no cover. Deer especially are frightened quickly. You could be several yards or meters, whichever system you use, away, and they can still hear you, even if you're stealthing. Now, overall, there's another mechanic that is not in Savage Lands but is in Valheim, and that's skills. You can upgrade skills such as running, jumping, using weapons, your bowman skills, your stealth skills can all level up the more you use them. Whereas in Savage Lands, there is no skill system. So that's a big difference between them as well. Now let's talk about resource gathering. There's not a lot of differences between gathering resources in Savage Lands and gathering resources in Velheim. You still need tools to gather some materials, but there are materials that are just lying around. Sticks and stones are everywhere in both games. Other resources such as flint and coal can be picked up, or in the case of Valheim, if you burn food or if you have a kiln, you can create coal that way. Other resources, such as getting more larger pieces of wood, finer wood, requires you to make an axe and cut down trees. One of the bosses, as I was playing later on, actually drops a material that allows you to create a pickaxe, to which you can mine things like tin and copper. And you gather resources that way. Food can be plucked right off of bushes in both games. And in Savage Lands, tools are made from higher and higher degrees of materials. You can make a hammer to mine rock and flint and coal and clay and eventually metals such as tin and copper and iron and all the others that eventually come into view. But overall, the resource gathering is not all that different. Now, in Valheim, you can farm food, which again is something that I haven't quite seen in my own game, but I have heard and watched others accomplish that. All right, so moving on to crafting. And I'm going to split this between crafting and building, because they're two separate things, and to some degree they require different things for the most part. In Savage Lands, there are multiple tables, a workbench and a crafting table. There's also the tanning stand, a forge, a smelter, all these different crafting stations that you need for your more advanced tools and resources and armor, weapons and bows and all forms of defensive items. And you can craft simple tools like a stone sword, a stone axe, a stone hammer right from the beginning, but they're not the best of quality. In Valheim, you start off, you can make a club, an axe, a hammer, a flint knife once you find some flint. Again, very rudimentary items. And you have to build a workbench in order to create more sophisticated tools and weapons. You also need a workbench in order to craft and repair items other than your weapons and normal gear, which also brings us into the next point of building. In Savage Lands, you don't need any of your crafting stations in order to actually build buildings. Buildings in Valheim, as we discussed earlier in the previous Valheim video, were prefabricated, predetermined buildings. You get a certain set of buildings, you can build those buildings. You can't build them from the ground up, piece by piece. You plant where you want to put the building and then add the resources to it. In Valheim, you do need a workbench in order to create 4 walls and a roof. And you literally put each individual set of walls to shape your building. You have to worry about how level the ground is. You have to have a roof over your head in order to actually use the workstation to craft items. And so building, as far as I'm concerned, is a little more customizable in Valheim, but a lot easier in Savage Lands so long as you got the materials to do it. The last thing I want to talk about is exploration. In Savage Lands, the closest thing to an aid in navigation is you can make a compass. There is not really a map per se in the game that you can use to figure out where you are. You have to essentially remember the lay of the land by yourself. On the other hand, Valheim has a full-fledged map system in that there is fog of war. Once you find an area or you explore an area, it is added to your map. You can place markers such as where your home is. You get the starting area as an icon. Once you find a stone with a boss's location on it, that location is added directly to your map. You can add in, oh, I found this resource here, but I couldn't get it all, and leave a marker there. You can say, oh, here's an abandoned house that I can use as a way station, and leave a marker for that. It's very convenient and very helpful in exploring, resource gathering, and the like. Overall, Savage Lands, when it first came out, was a pretty nice game. It was very savage, just as the name entails. But with the reduction in the fan base and the handoff of the development, it being so long of an early access game, it's probably not going to reclaim the hype it had back when it was first released. Valheim, on the other hand, within a month has a massive thriving community. They're updating on a regular basis. They have a lot of new content that they're wanting to put out, and there's already a lot of content already in it. It has, in my opinion, a very long lifespan so long as the developers continue in the route that they're going. Again, Valheim has a very overwhelmingly positive review set, and after playing it for several hours myself, I can understand why it's all the hype. I mean, it's Vikings, it's survival, it's everything you would want out of this kind of a game. So that will wrap it up for this video. I want to thank you for watching. Hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment if you enjoyed it. Also hit the bell to know when I put forth new videos and get notified of that. And yeah, thank you so very much for watching, and stay safe, everybody, and stay blessed.